let's talk about how we use the tenets of rational choice and kind of the classical school in general to reduce or eliminate crime. So coming from this perspective, we can start with the idea that crime is an attractive, easier alternative to normal work and effort. So if people didn't feel like crime brought these rewards and made things easier or got them something that they otherwise wouldn't have access to or wouldn't have access to as easily, if people didn't feel that way, then we wouldn't commit crimes. People wouldn't commit crimes. So it just wouldn't. The crime has this payoff, or else there would be no crime. So the big thing is that it brings rewards, there's excitement, prestige, it solves problems, and so we have to recognize that to try to reduce or eliminate crime. If crime is rational, it can then be controlled by instilling certain ideas in kind of the general populace. We want to convince people, which includes the general population, but also past offenders, current offenders, potential future offenders. We want to instill these ideas in kind of everybody. First, we want to instill the idea that crime is a bad choice. And so if we make it so that crime brings little rewards, or at least the perception is that it brings little rewards, then that will help reduce it. So if we want to focus on that, cost-benefit analysis, which if you haven't seen my other videos on rational choice, definitely go watch those first to really set you up for understanding what I'm talking about here. But if we have this cost-benefit analysis, then one way we want to tip the scale is say, well, the good things that come from crime actually not as good as you think, or not as plentiful as you think, or not as easy to get as you think. So if we make it so that there are little rewards or less rewards, then we want to instill this idea that crime is a bad thing, and you don't actually get these rewards, this excitement, this prestige. It doesn't solve problems. It causes more problems. And so if we can instill that idea, then that can help reduce crime. We also want to instill the idea that crime is difficult. It's not worth the effort. It's not actually the easier alternative. It's actually really hard. You have to actually really know what you're doing. And you have to be really lucky and to get away with it. And so if we instill this idea that crime is actually difficult, it's not the easier alternative, then that will also help to reduce crime. And then we also want to instill the idea that crime brings pain, so that the hardship and deprivation of freedom that comes with crime, we want to sort of focus on that. And so this will be enough pain to make it so that people fear it, and those who have experienced that pain don't want to experience it again. So this kind of goes from the other side of the reward punishment kind of side of the weighing, where we're increasing the punishment and increasing the negatives, so that we want to tip that scale that way. So situational crime prevention very much taps into all these types of ideas. And so this was brought about by Clark in the 80s. And so they talked about especially the physical measures that we can use in situational crime prevention. So just like what it sounds like, it's crime prevention through situational measures. And so if we look at physical measures, this is as opposed to like social measures, so reducing the opportunities for crime. And so we're talking about things that are like physical manipulation of the environment, as opposed to like social things like having people and programming and things like that would be more social, but we're talking about actual physical changes to an environment to reduce the opportunities for crime. In order to be successful, situational crime prevention measures have to target specific crime types. So if you're just like, oh, we want to reduce crime in this area, there's not going to be one situational crime prevention measure that will reduce all crime. You have to say, well, there are a lot of B&Es in this area, so like let's increase visibility, or let's have people trim back bushes that are providing hiding spots for these B&E burglars, offenders, or something like, well, vandalism is happening at this particular area, especially at night. So, let's increase lighting in that area, or, let's make it so we don't have like a giant white wall painted with that is like a perfect canvas for, somebody to tag. Let's actually, that's often why they put up fences against walls, and you're like, why is there a fence here? There's a wall right there. But it's about preventing vandalism. So you have to target, the more specific you are in the targeting of your situational crime prevention measure, the more effective it's going to be for that specific thing you're targeting. So situational crime prevention measures then are, they're concerned with the management as well as the original design or the later manipulation of the immediate environment. So this includes things like target hardening. So this is where we want to make the objects of crime less vulnerable. So target hardening would be things like adding locks to doors, wheel locks in cars. So things that make it harder to get in to a place, or harder to victimize a person or place. So target hardening of a person could be, having somebody, carrying mace in their purse, or self-defense classes or whatever, however much those tend to help. So target hardening, though, is reducing the vulnerability of whatever the target might be, whether it's a person or a thing. And then there's also something that's called defensible space. And this is where if you have a public area, then people don't have ownership over that area because by definition it's public. So something like a park, nobody owns that. However, if you place that park in a residential area, the nearby residents will consider it part of theirs. It'll be their park, and they will have this feeling of, I need to defend this place because this is my park. It's where my kids go. It's where I go to spend time. It's where my friends go. It's our neighborhood park. So even though it's a public area, it becomes this, they want to defend that space. So you have this territorial surveillance of public spaces by the nearby residents. And so figuring out where to put things like that where crime could happen could help defend them. If you have a public park that's in the middle of a commercial area, nobody's going to feel like that's their park, and they're not going to feel that same sense of wanting to defend it. So situational crime prevention then is all about increasing the risk and effort and decreasing the rewards. So we're tipping those scales. We're making it so crime is harder, it's riskier, and even if you get away with it, you're getting away with less. So a perfect example of a situational crime prevention measure is if you think of like convenience stores that have the sign up that lets you know that, there's only a maximum amount of $100 in the till at any given time, because once they reach $100, it's taken out and there's a whole process. So that's decreasing the rewards because you're like, well, I could rob this place, but based on the information that I have, the most I could get is $100 or just shy of $100. And that's not really worth it if I thought I might be able to get more than that. So we can decrease the rewards, and that's a situational measure that decreases the rewards, but then we can also increase risk and effort by having things like cameras, surveillance cameras, makes it riskier, or, locks or barricades or other kind of physical obstacles that people have to get through if they were trying to escape or offend against a person or to take something. If we're making it harder and riskier, then it's less likely to happen. And we have to remember that this is from the perception of the offender. So this is the offender's viewpoint. So the perceived costs and benefits are actually more important than the actual costs and benefits. Because the factors that affect decision making are evaluated from the person making that decision. So the most important environmental aspects to change then are those perceived costs, the perceived benefits, whether or not the actual costs and benefits have been altered in any way. So this means that something I like to tell people is that if you can't afford a security system, let's say in your house, because they are expensive, although they have a certain place where, in terms of preventing crime, where we can, figure out who did it and then get them arrested, things like that. But there's also the deterrent effect of having that in the first place. And that's something that you can have without actually having the security system in place. If you even get like a sticker or something, that you can put in your window, or the thing that goes in your yard that says, this area is protected by whatever. You could even make up your own place if you wanted, just to make it look like there's some kind of security system in place. That might do as much as if you actually had a security system in place in terms of deterring people in the first place. And so they're not going to take advantage because that looks like a harder target than if I went to this other house that doesn't seem to have a security system. So you don't have to actually have it. It's about the perception. And there's also, there's something that also happens that's called the diffusion of benefits. And this is where the situational crime prevention often does this, where you're trying to prevent one crime, and so you focus on things like maybe there's a lot of assaults happening in a park, and so you're increasing lighting, or you have a law enforcement officer of some kind, doing just a random patrols through it, or increasing the like picking up garbage and stuff so that people feel like it's a nicer place and things like that. And so you're doing that to reduce assaults, but it might actually end up preventing other crimes as well. And so, like, maybe you're trying to prevent assaults, but it also prevents thefts, and it prevents, robbery. And so maybe there are other things, and that's what's called the diffusion of benefits. So I'm focusing on this thing, but the benefits actually diffuse to other types in that area, or it might also diffuse out to other nearby areas as well. And so that's just an extra benefit of situational crime prevention that can just happen without you even really intending. And then, so crime prevention through environmental design is one type of situational crime prevention measure, and we call this CPTED. And CPTED strategies are based on what's called the criminal's SAT test. And these are kind of questions that the criminal will ask before committing a crime. And so the SAT test the first is, for the S in SAT is surveillance. And so this is basically asking the question, well, will I be seen? So, for example, more houses will get burglarized when there's less visual access from neighboring houses. And convenience stores get robbed less after installing cameras. And that's all about surveillance. So will the person be seen when they're trying to commit this crime? If they feel like they will be, they're less likely to commit the crime. The A in the SAT test is access. So, this is basically, can I get in and out? So, more houses get burglarized when there's things like fewer fences, fewer locked gates, because it's easier access. Crime rates also were found to drop in parking garages when they added those chain link fences to prevent the entrance on lower levels. So you have the waist level, cement barricades, but that's easily hopped over by a pedestrian or somebody without a car. So it was easy for them to hop in and, steal something from a car and hop out. But you just put up the fence to block that open area. The access is reduced. So it's a CPTED strategy to reduce access. And then the T in the SAT test is territoriality. And this is basically, does anybody care what happens here? So this is actually very much related to the broken windows theory, which is the idea that, general disorder in an area increases crime. And so something like convenience stores are less likely to be robbed when they're further away from areas of graffiti, because if there's a lot of graffiti right around the area, it's that area is perceived as nobody caring about it. And so crime is more accepted in this area. So like the example I gave of, picking up litter in a park, that can help increase territoriality because it shows that somebody cares about what happens here. So one strategy being used is often not enough. And so the SAT test and sort of the surveillance access and territoriality, they affect each other. So, for example, if you can't be seen, tough access might be easier to overcome because you have more time to get through physical barriers. So if you just focus on access but you don't care about surveillance, then if somebody's hidden while they're trying to overcome some kind of access barrier, they have more time to do that. So it's not really a problem. So CPTED is kind of one way that we can implement the ideas of situational crime prevention.